Hello, my sweet sugar bushes. Welcome to another fabulous installment of Crime and Cosmetics. I am so sorry if I'm covered in cat hair right now. One of my babies has an eye infection, so I've been giving her extra lovin's until we can get her to the vet on Monday. Some of you guys have emailed me and been like, hey, you should use an eyeshadow primer. I actually do use eyeshadow primer. I just put it on before I start filming. But I very much appreciate all your tips. Please, please, please keep them coming, because Lord knows that I need them. So today, I think we're going to do a blue and orange. Someone sent me, Alice sent me this orange that was on my Amazon wish list and said that she'd like to see me use it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use an orange and a blue, and maybe throw in some other colors, depends on how I'm feeling. The absolute piece of garbage we are talking about today is Mr. Robert Willy Pickton. If you don't know who Mr. Robert Willy Pickton is, he's Canada's most infamous serial killer. So let's get started. We're gonna do like a little sunset style look with orange and blue. So Pickton was born 24th of October 1949. He had a brother. His parents owned a pig farm about 15 miles just outside of Vancouver. This pig farm is where Pickton and his brothers spent most of their time. They worked on the farm. That was their life. Their mother was a bit of a tyrant. She was very cold, not very loving or emotionally supportive, as a mother usually is. The boys worked on the farm from sun up to sundown. They were very much known, and the farm itself wasn't very hygienic. They raised pigs and slaughtered pigs there. Pickton and his brother were kind of known as being like the dirty kids. Whenever they would go to school on the bus, they wouldn't bathe or anything like that. So nobody wanted to sit by them. They spent a lot of time together. And Pickton himself was placed in special education classes and things of that nature. But yeah, so him and his brother spent a lot of time with each other just because the other kids didn't really want to hang around them. Their mother was a grade A bitch, was very cold, very non-emotionally supportive. She worked them to the bone when, on the pig farm. One day when Willy was about 11 years old, he used his savings to go down to the local auction and buy a calf. And it wasn't a calf that he had planned to slaughter. He basically bought it as a pet. He raised it, he cared for it, he gave it a name, and that was his baby. That was his pet, essentially. Until one day he comes home, he realizes, he can't find it, can't find his baby calf, and then he goes and asks his mother where's my baby calf? And she says, well, go check the barn. And so he goes and checks the barn, and come to find out that his mother had slaughtered the calf. And a lot of people believe that is about the last time he, that's about around when he severed emotional ties with any kind of living being. It kind of turned him into this cold, emotionless person, because his mother had slaughtered his, something that he loved, something that he held dear to him. I would be pissed off too. Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, him and his brother really just hated school, down to the core. They would go to the bus stop, and then when they were out of sight from their mother and father, they would sneak back into the house and hide under their bed until school was over, and then continue to work on the farm. So as time went on, Willy, and I think his brother did as well, I can't exactly remember, but they end up dropping out of school at around 14 years old. It's around this time that Willy gets an apprenticeship with the local butcher and realizes that he really has a knack for dissecting animals. He was very, very skilled at butchering animals, bleeding them, dissecting them, packaging up the meat, things of that nature. He was very, very good at it, and when it came down to it, that was about the only thing he really knew how to do well. On October 16th of 1967, Dave Pickton, Willy's brother, fresh fresh driver, just got his license. He takes the family's truck and he goes joyriding around the back roads that encircled their property. Now, while he was on this joyride, a child walking on the side of the road that he somehow missed ends up walking out in front of the truck. Dave ends up hitting this kid and leaving the scene as this kid is on the side of the road, brutally injured. He goes back to the farm and tells his mother what happened. She says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." She says, "I know exactly what to do. Just take the truck to the garage, get it cleaned up, clean up any blood that's on it, fix it up. If anything's broken, make sure it gets fixed, and I will take care of this." So she drives out to, she goes and finds where Dave had hit this this child. And what she does is she ends up taking him and rolling him into a nearby ditch that was full of water. And ultimately, the kid ends up drowning to death in that ditch. If they had just called law enforcement or paramedics, that kid would have survived. But instead, I guess the mother was scared of, Dave going and being arrested, being charged. And they also, they didn't want their family name to be tarnished as much, more than it already was. So that was, at that point, they kind of started feeling like, we can get away with anything now since we've gotten away with murder. So in 1970, after Willy's 21st birthday, he basically quits his job as an apprentice butcher. He begins working full-time on his family's pig farm, and that's what he has dedicated his life to. Now, what would happen is he would work full-time on his family's pig farm, and then afterwards, he would go down to Vancouver's lower east side, I think it was. And basically, he would go to the lower east side's version of Skid Row, and he would go solicit women for sex. He would offer drugs in return. He had money. He would buy them things, and in the beginning, that's really all it was. He never was abusive towards the women he picked up. It was always just for, kind of companionship, and he would, they felt somewhat safe around him, and soon, he kind of got this reputation. He started getting this reputation of being like a generally well-liked and nice guy. And as time went on, that turned into his daily routine. He would work at the farm, and then afterwards, he would drop animal waste, basically all the organs of the animals, the pigs that he butchered. He would drop them off at a waste plant downtown, and then he would hit up the lower east side of Vancouver and solicit women. He would go to bars and stuff like that. There was a hotel that he hung out at, and he was very well known. It was called the Astoriat Hotel, I believe. Astoriat Hotel. He was very well known there. He was known as being a big spender. He was nice, The women told their friends, if he comes up and he picks you up, go with him. He's got a lot of money and he pays well, blah, 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 blah. But as time begins to go on, he still has this kind of reputation of being a nice guy, but there were often times he would take women back to his trailer, and then he would get violent and causing them to flee. It wasn't anything along the lines of homicide yet, but he kind of had this fixation on BDSM, very rough sex, things of that nature, and he tried to push the limits further and further every time he picked someone up. So in January of 1978, Willy's father ends up passing away, and soon after, his mother is diagnosed with terminal cancer. It's said that caring for his mother deeply traumatized Willy, because it was something like, this person cared for him growing up and stuff like that, and now he's having to, change her diapers, things of that nature, and it deeply traumatized him as time went on. So around April of that same year, his mother actually ends up passing away from cancer, and after that, Willy's brother and sister don't want anything to do with the family business. I did forget to mention that he also had a sister, but when growing up, his sister wasn't around because his dad sent her away to live with someone else, because his dad believed that, life on a pig farm was no was no place for a young lady. So like I said, his brother and sister really didn't want anything to do with the family business. Willy continued to, you know, raise, slaughter, and butcher pigs. His brother ends up moving into the main house on the property, the big house where they all grew up. Willy feels more comfortable taking a trailer and moving it to an isolated part of the property, because it was a big farm, and staying there. And now it's around this time, you know, things start to escalate because he's finally free to do whatever he wants. He has a nice little plot of land that he can pretty much have free reign over. So he begins more and more, you know, after work, he would go downtown to the Lower East End, pick up ladies in the evening, and bring them back to his trailer. Now, in 1980, Willy spots a young woman walking around downtown. He ends up picking her up, and then he ends up brutally raping her and ditching her in a parking lot. And that's kind of when things start to escalate. Now he's had this taste of non-consensual and thrill, and he's gonna start pushing his limits now. And so in 1994, Willy and his brother end up selling a northern plot of the property that they own. It nets them about $2 million. And now they are flushed with cash. They open up like a social, I think it was like a bar or a social hall. It was like an entertainment company basically, where they would throw parties and social events for other people themselves. It was called Piggy's Palace Good Time Society. And they would regularly throw parties. They would regularly, you know, have women around, stuff like that. And Willy would pick women up at these parties. He was now getting a bigger reputation for being, you know, flushed with cash, being somebody that, you know, if he picks you up, you want to go with him because you're going to get a good paycheck out of it. So March of 1997, Willy picks up a young woman by the name of Wendy. And so Willy takes Wendy back to his little trailer on the isolated part of their land. They start engaging in the old parent wrestling, but Willy becomes, you know, more and more aggressive as they continue, and Wendy's not okay with that, so she starts telling him to stop, to get off her. He refuses. They get into an altercation as Willy tried to handcuff her, and she wasn't okay with it, and when she broke out, he ends up trying to attack her with a knife. As he's trying to attack her, she runs into the main living area of the trailer, grabs a knife herself, and a knife fight ensues. They start gashing each other, slashing each other open with these with knives, and Wendy ends up running away, and she gets to a main road, and a elderly couple pick her up. She explains what happened. They take her to the hospital, where she is seen by doctors, and the police begin to get involved. So Willy is charged with assault and booked into custody, but Wendy is too terrified to pursue with charges and testify in court. Ultimately, the charges are dismissed and dropped, and Willy's record is clean, basically. So August of 1997, Willy returns to the Lower East End of Vancouver. They call it the Low Track. He picks up 24-year-old Monty Frey. She is a heroin addict. He offers her, you know, drugs in exchange for sexual favors. They go back to his trailer. After they have sex, Willy turns extremely violent, ultimately ends up murdering Monty. It's to believe that he butchered her, disposed of her body parts, as well as taking some of the body parts, you know, mixing it in with the pig's organs and turning it into that waste reduction plant. 1995 to 1997, around 21 women have vanished from Vancouver's Lower Track. Police aren't really paying a lot of attention to this, though, because it's kind of like what happened in the Alaska Robert Hansen case. It's one of those things where police don't really, you know, sex workers are going missing, you know, whatever. They probably just up and hopped on a Greyhound and left, this, that, and the other. They're not really taking it seriously. Kind of one of those things where they're like, oh, well, you put yourself in this situation. Bunch of bullshit, basically. A woman by the name of Elaine Allen actually ran a women's shelter around that side of town. She reported several women missing to the police because she saw a lot of these women that Willy was picking up, you know, because they would come into the shelter for a place to stay, food, stuff like that. and to talk with each other, and she started noticing that some of them were going missing, and so she ends up reporting that to the authorities, but the authorities never follow up on these reports. And in 1998, 9 more women vanish, and nobody knows what's happening, and nobody suspects Willy because, again, like I told you, he had that reputation for being like a nice guy, a big spender, someone that treated the women he picked up right, so no one thought he was responsible for all these women up and missing. When reported to police, they don't follow up on it. They just tell families, well, they probably hopped on a Greyhound bus and skedaddled on out of here. What do you want us to do about it, lady? So one night, one of Willy's friends, Lynn Ellingson, was staying on the property. Willy was allowing her to stay, in his trailer. She, after getting high, and this was in 1999, after getting high one night, she wakes up to these, weird sounds coming from one of the barns. She's not sure if, it's her imagination playing tricks on her or if something like that. But she gets up, she decides to go and investigate. And when she does, she kind of goes to take a peek in the barn that the sounds are coming from. And that's where she sees Georgina Papin hanging from a meat hook while Willy is dissecting her. She freaks out, starts screaming, and takes off running, and starts, getting the fuck out of there, obviously. And Willy, for some reason, doesn't go after her. He's not worried that she's going to go to the police. He probably knows that the police don't take women like this seriously. And he's not afraid that he's going to get caught or anything like that. So he just goes about his merry way, dissecting Miss Papin. And it turns out, if I remember correctly, she actually never went to the police because I think she was too afraid that something might happen to her if she does. But after this, word kind of starts spreading around the low track that, if Willy comes around asking for you, just don't get in his truck. God dang, I was having a doozy of a time with this wing right here. She was not wanting to cooperate, but wrestled her into submission. So, as I was saying, one night, Miss Brenda Wolf goes missing. She was working down in the lower track when Willy comes and picks her up. He still kind of has this reputation of being a good, big spending guy, very generous. But word was getting around that, if Willy comes to pick you up, don't go with him. But Miss Wolf really needed the money. So she ends up getting into Willy's truck, going to his trailer. He had this method where basically what he would do, he would pick these women up, take them to his trailer. After having sex, he would then make up some kind of fabricated story to get himself in a rage. Like maybe they stole money from him or something of that nature. He would then work himself into this rage, and then he would go on to kill these women. Miss Wolf, he ended up taking her life, and then he took her to the barn, dissected her, and then buried some of her body parts on the property, and then took another portion of her body parts, put it into a big barrel with other pig waste, and took it to the treatment center he would dispose of the pig organs at. So in 2001, the missing women is now up to 62. It's at the point now police cannot ignore it any longer, and then that's when they form the Missing Women Task Force. Reward posters are now pasted up for any information leading to where, the whereabouts of these women. The reward is around $100,000 just for information. Thousands and thousands of tips come in to this task force. Some of them do actually mention a pig farmer. That's what leads Willy to eventually get added to the list of suspects. But like I said, there were thousands of tips, so just because he was added to the list doesn't mean that, it was immediately followed up on. Back in this time, the police really they had terrible records. They had never really been on the look for an actual serial killer in their area before, and there was no DNA database that they could look through. And then as far as they knew, Willy had a charge for assault, but it was never a conviction. It said that he just somehow slipped through the cracks. Gonna reinforce this blue a little bit. I do like this little sunset look. Little ocean sunset. So Willy, even though, he's been added to the list of suspects, he's not aware of this, but he continues to go on his killing spree. He ends up taking the lives of June Andrea Joesgrave and August Serena Abbotsway. But for some reason, and no one really knows why, he didn't dispose of their bodies right away. After he took their life and butchered them, he ended up taking their head, their hands, and their feet, putting them in a bucket, and then putting them in a freezer. Which is very off, because whenever he would kill a victim, he would immediately dissect them, chop them up. Like I said, he was a very skilled butcher, and put them in, bury them around the property, or put them in barrels and take them to the treatment plant. Maybe he was just getting sloppy at this point by leaving body parts behind. So in November of 2001, Willy ends up picking up, I really like how this look is going. We're gonna use a different brush to blend, because this one's kind of hurting my eyes. Willy, November 2001, Willy stops and picks up Mona Wilson. She's a little reluctant to get in the car, but again, she needs the money. So what happens is he picks her up, but instead of taking her to the trailer like he usually does, he takes her to a camper that's parked behind a bar. He then savagely beats her and shoots her with a .22 revolver. When he shot her, it was very messy. There was blood splatter on the walls. Her blood, he didn't clean it up immediately, so the blood soaked into the mattress, it soaked into the carpet. He just, he didn't bother cleaning up any part of the scene, so there was just DNA all over the place. Hey Sugar Bushes, sorry to do this again, but I accidentally left out some information that I thought was pretty important. Around the time that reputation started, or word starting to get around that, if you were usually the women who left with Willy didn't return, it was becoming harder for Willy to lure women into his truck that he could take back to his trailer. So in return, what he did is he sent his friend Dina Taylor into women's shelters, and Dina would go up to women and be like, oh, hey, let's go party with Uncle Willy. He's got booze, he's got drugs, he's got money for us. It's always a good time when we party with Uncle Willy. And then she would then bring these women back to Willy's trailer. So now, Willy wasn't having to go out and convince these women to get in his truck. He was literally having them brought to him, and that gave him this sense of power, like he was untouchable. He was this big almighty force that couldn't be reckoned with, so much as he didn't even have to go out and pick up women. They were just coming to him. But that is a piece of information I thought was important to the story. I apologize for doing this again. I'm going to try to fit everything into the initial video next time. There was just a lot to go over with this case. This video is around almost 40 minutes long. Our usual is around 20-25. But I do apologize if you'll forgive me this one time, and I will do my best not to forget information in our next video. Thank you so much. Love you. So by the end of 2001, 64 women have gone missing, and police are not any closer to finding out who is behind and who is responsible for this. That is until a truck driver gives police a tip-off, not for the missing women, but that Mr. Willy Pickton had illegal weapons in his trailer. So after they get this tip about illegal weapons in Willy's trailer, they obtain a search warrant. And then 4 days later, they go and they search the property. Now, while searching the property, they find an inhaler in Willy's trailer that has the names of one of the missing women on it. After they find this inhaler, they halt the weapons search. They obtain a new warrant. The Missing Women's Task Force is involved now. They obtain this new warrant and they begin searching the property in search for these missing women. So as they begin searching the property and search for any signs that he is responsible for these missing women, they find the camper. And inside the camper, they find Miss Wilson's DNA all over the place, the blood that's soaked into the mattress. It's all over the cabinets, it's all over the floor. And then as they begin searching outside around the camper in a trash can, they find what is left of Miss Wilson, and it was described as floating in a pool of red and pink soup. Her body parts, her, organs, hands, stuff like that were all just thrown into this rubbish bin. and she was bled out in it as well. The initial investigation lasts for 11 hours. Now, at this time, they detain Mr. Pickton. After they arrest him, they did interrogate him, but he wouldn't talk, and so they're like, okay, we're just going to lock you in the cell until we can get the rest of your property searched. Now, what they did, though, is they knew that one of the reasons, he enjoyed the notoriety he got from this. So what they did is they took an undercover police officer and they placed him in the cell with Mr. Pickton to see if they could get him to talk. And lo and behold, he does. He starts confessing to these crimes to this person who he thinks is his cellmate, and ends up telling him everything. And he mentions the waste treatment plant that he would drop the bodies off at, mixed with the pig organs. And he mentions that he was looking to make his number an even 50. So on the 22nd of February, he is charged with Serena Abbotsway and Mona Wilson's murder. The police do not have any idea how much, how many women are buried on this property. They get a map of the property and they plan it grid by grid, grid box by grid box. And that's what they do. They go through the entire property, grid box by grid box, digging it up and searching for the remains of any other missing women. And by April 2002, police have enough evidence to charge him with 5 more counts of murder. And in 2004, Canadian health officials also released a statement saying that there may have been some cross-contamination due to him mixing the human body parts with the pig body parts at the refinery. So that gets people terrified. Again, this is the biggest serial killer investigation in all of Canada. They have never had anyone of this magnitude. And initially, when the trial started, there was a press ban, so people were kind of on the edge of their seat trying to figure out what the exact details of this case was. The investigation ends up lasting around 22 months, and by the end of it, they have enough evidence to charge Willy with 22 more murders. So I tried to do like wings on the inside, and I don't know, man, my eyeliner's not wanting to transfer onto my skin for it, so I just did these little leggy boys right there. So in 2006, the trials finally begin. The pre-trials take almost a year. One of those counts of murder is dropped due to lack of evidence, and the judge orders that the trial be split into 2 parts because he feels like if it's all into one, there's too much of a chance for a mistrial. He's going to now stand trial in the first part for 6 counts of murders. The judge also limits what details journalists could share to the public as not to further tamper with the trial. Of course, Mr. Pickton pleads not guilty for the first half of the trial. So Ellickson, the one that actually had witnessed Willy butchering that poor woman, testified against him in court, but the defense did a really good job of ripping apart her testimony, stating that, she was on drugs at the time, she was an addict, and this was her lifestyle. How can we think what she's saying is, telling the truth because she was so out of her mind at that point in time, blah, 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 blah. And effectively kind of ends up making the jury question if, Willy could actually do these murders. Because the main part of their defense was that they were making it out to see that Willy was a simpleton and he was not capable of committing such atrocities because he was so simple-minded and this, that, and the other. And when in reality, anyone is capable of murder. And again, the public is still freaking out at this point because limited information is being given to them for, obvious reasons. And this is the first time something of this magnitude has ever gone down in the area, so everyone's on the edge of their seat. There is a ton of evidence that was brought up during the trial against Willy. Lab staff also testified that there were about 80 unidentified DNA profiles on the farm, about half of them male, half of them female. The items, so this is a short list of some of the items that were found on the farm. There was a loaded .22 revolver with a dildo attached as a makeshift suppressor, 1 spent shell casing, a box of .357 ammo, night vision goggles, a pair of faux fur lined handcuffs, and a syringe with 3 milliliters of blue liquid and Spanish fly aphrodisiac. a videotape of Pickton's friend Scott Chubb saying that Pickton had told him a good way to kill female heroin addicts was to inject them with windshield washer fluid. Another tape was placed in which an associate of Pickton says that Pickton mentioned killing sex workers by handcuffing them and strangling them before bleeding and gutting them and feeding them to the pigs. So on December 9th of 2007, the jury finally reached a verdict of not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder. But guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. And the judge on December 11th of 2007 sentenced Pickton to 25 years behind bars without the possibility of parole, which would have been the maximum sentence he could have received if he was charged for first-degree murder. I remember watching in one of the documentaries I watched, some of the people, they were like, oh, we thought we had him. He was going to get convicted. The jury wouldn't, have any problems convicting someone like this because of all the evidence that has been presented. And they said, whenever I watched the jury come out and some of them were crying, I knew that may not be the case and we may have a problem. The judge, when passing his sentence of 25 years with no possibility of parole to Pickton, stated that Mr. Pickton's conduct was murderous and repeatedly so. I cannot know the details, but I know this. What happened to them was senseless and despicable. On August 4th of 2010, the Crown decided to stay the 20 other murder charges against Pickton. I didn't know what that meant at first, so I had to look it up, and if you don't know what it means, I'll explain it to you here. Basically, the Crown has decided that this trial would be bad for the justice system and would be susceptible to mistrials, so they're just not going to bring it to court. Now, the Crown has the option to bring that case into court a year after, within a year it's been stayed, but that was in 2010, so I don't see that happening. But ultimately, Pickton was never charged or convicted or brought to trial for the other 20 charges of first-degree murder he had against him. While Pickton was incarcerated, and he still is, he wrote a 144-page autobiography called Pickton in His Own Words. He then passed it off to a cellmate, who passed it off to a friend, and that friend got it published. But after news spread that was going on, many activist groups started forming petitions, launched tons of campaigns to make sure he would not be able to profit off of that book. They also expressed interest to put into laws that criminals such as Pickton could not profit off any marketing that they did surrounding their, infamy, basically. Places like Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Nova Scotia, and Ontario, they have laws in place for that. And eventually, the publisher Outskirts Press had the book removed from Amazon when they learned, who actually wrote the book, because the book itself had the name of another individual on it, but it was written by Pickton. There's also something called the Pickton Letters, which is apparently a journalist is writing to Pickton while he's incarcerated under the guise of being a down-on-her-luck woman. There's not much to learn from that. I couldn't really find anything on that. But that is the case of Robert Willy Pickton, also known as the Pig Farmer, or also known as the Butcher. It is one of Canada's most notorious serial killer cases, and if I remember correctly, one of the largest. Finish this look. I need to practice on my design work. I had to rub off some things that I messed up, and you can kind of tell that there's a little patchy spot right there. But I think we're getting a lot better at this now. I really like this little nice blue and orange look. Thank you so much for this little orange tin. I don't know what they're called when they're in singles tray tin. I don't know, but that's what we're going to call it. But that's the case of Robert Willy Pickton. And now is the time in our show where we pick next week's serial killer. Or true crime. It doesn't have to be serial killers. We do cults, true crime, anything that involves crazy crime, basically. We have our lovely murder pot here. Oh. Boom. We're going to go ahead and give her a little whirl. This one kept sticking in my palm. Let's see who it is. Yes! I have been wanting to do this case. Next week, we're going to go over Pazuzu. I've been wanting to cover Pazuzu for a minute, and I'm super excited. It is an absolute bananas case, so you are not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much, though, for stopping by for another installment of Crime and Cosmetics. I do apologize, the last video that I put out on Robert Hansen, there were some things that I said in that video that made absolutely no sense. Like, he takes a sleep, or in the early mornings of the hour, stuff like that. And I noticed it when I was editing, and I was just like, how did I let that slip without correcting myself? I'm still working on speaking properly for these videos, so please do bear with me. Just like you've bared with me for the whole makeup thing. But I think we're getting better. I think we're getting a little good. I do like the way these little designs turned out. But again, thank you so much for stopping by. If you have a cult, serial killer, something crazy, true crime worthy that you want discussed, please leave it in the comments below. I will write it on a note card and add it to our murder pot. I also just ordered a spirit box. If you don't know what that is, look it up because they're awesome. I'm going to be doing some spirit box sessions as well and posting them here. So I'm super excited to do that. I really want to start up some more paranormal stuff. I know we haven't done paranormal corner in a long time. I've just been so busy with the YouTube channel, you know, TikTok, stuff like that. But I promise we'll start doing some of that here soon. Thank you so much for the support. It means the absolute world to me. I also have a P.O Box if you want to write letters, if you want something, you know, said on air, please send me a letter to my P.O Box. I'll leave the address in the description of this video. And I actually just posted a P.O Box opening video, and once I get, you know, accumulate letters and letters, we'll start opening them and reading them on air. So if you have a story you want to tell, something you want to say, please write me. I would love to see it. Eventually I want to make a big scrapbook full of the letters that you guys have sent me. Again, you're always welcome to join our Coven. That is our Discord server. We just hang out, you know, it's an absolute shit show, but it's fun. I have a podcast on Spotify, Apple Music. You can listen to it wherever you get podcasts. It's called Snacks Packs, SNAXPX. I would love it if you guys could give that a listen, download it, tell me what you think. Please rate it, review it. The more you do that on these streaming services like Apple Music and stuff, it gets seen by more people, and I would love to, you know, grow our audience just as we are continuing to grow our audience here with Crime and Cosmetics and Paranormal Corner and things of that nature. As always, I very much appreciate and value your continued support. It means the absolute world to me because, you know, at the end of the day, this is what I want to do. I want to be an entertainer and entertain you guys and make content that you guys like. If you have any suggestions for anything else, feel free to leave them in the comments of this video. As always, thank you so much. I love you. Till next week, next Sunday, we're going to go over Pazuzu, and you don't want to miss it because it's going to be pants crapping crazy. But thank you so much for stopping by. As always, be kind to others. Please, please, please be kind to yourself. I hope you have the best day ever and all the good things happen to you. I will see you guys next Sunday for Pazuzu. Have a good one. Stay safe and wear a mask.